What a huge sports weekend that actually turns into even better because of today's basketball national title tonight, which I hate that it's tonight, but still awesome for sports fans that you kind of just continue on from what has been a tremendous week. And now down in the South, they normally care a lot more about the national championship than they do about the NFL, but maybe there's a flipping of the script.
Well, the Big Ten has replaced the SEC as the kings of college football.
I know.
If the Indiana Hoosiers can pull this off tonight, back-to-back years for the Big Ten.
Are you rooting for the Big Ten?
I am absolutely rooting for the Hoosiers.
I'm going to tell you why.
I can never root for the Miami Hurricanes.
Well, I'm going to tell you
on
why.
Principle.
I used to think that was loser mentality.
By the way, someone tell Michael
fans,
Irvin he's not playing for the Hurricanes anymore.
Well, I already have his itinerary in my phone. I know what he was doing last night into today. Anyway,
was he at the White House?
I'm not commenting on that. I think that's beyond the pale, Daryl. But what I will say is this, that I don't think it's as loser mentality as I used to think when I used to call out the SEC fans for all cheering for each other. And I'll tell you why it's different in this case. But we have got to get to the Make It Right Call Kyle Wright hotline and welcome Abe Gordon, former producer of the show, doing big things down in the ATL. Now, before you go, Abe, welcome to the show. We've got to play something for you. Yeah, we have to do this. And you're a frequent guest now. Twice in 2 weeks would never happen on Ken Carman's watch. But we appreciate you coming on to talk about Kevin Stefanski. But we got to play some audio from a gentleman named Isaac Hayes III. What a perfect name. Great name. He is the founder and CEO of something called Fanbase. I don't know anything about this guy, but I heard this audio. And so I said, we've got to confront Abe with this audio. So here it is.
So you're going to tell me that Matt Ryan hired Kevin Stefanski to coach the Atlanta Falcons when, in his previous role with Cleveland, he tried to railroad and undermine the career of Shedeur Sanders, whose father is a Falcons player, probably the most famous Atlanta Falcons player, maybe next to Mike Vick, and bring him into a city with a predominantly African-American fan base to coach this team.
Abe, your thoughts on MLK Day. How are you feeling about Kevin Stefanski? How are they feeling about Kevin Stefanski down there?
Well, you tell me, did Kevin Stefanski railroad and try and end Shedeur's career? Because that's a lot of conversation down here. And look, I think we all understand the history of this city being a southern city, and it's been some tough times, obviously, and it is a very racial city, and there is a serious percentage of the Atlanta Falcons fan base that is viewing it in that light, that Kevin Stefanski tried to railroad Shedeur Sanders. They're going to try and railroad Michael Penix. I don't necessarily see it that way. What do you guys think? Did Kevin Stefanski railroad Shedeur?
No, I think that there needs to be more accountability on Shedeur's experience and his preparation to get to the NFL level. And then also, too, there's an adaptation that has to occur. I mean, Shedeur, to be fair to him, was asked to do, and it's part of the job requirement, you're having to do more as a quarterback in the NFL than you had to do in college. And that is a natural progression. That's a process. There's nothing wrong with it. But look, at the same time, Dillon Gabriel, who I think is an awful quarterback, nice kid, awful quarterback, was further along in that process than Shedeur was. But listen, Shedeur started more games than Dillon Gabriel did this year, and Shedeur ended up winning
he actually got
games.
More opportunity, actually had the easier slate in terms of the defenses he went up against. Look, Abe, it is the central argument that we had all season about how fairly the treatment of the fifth-round pick who came in as a superstar, is a famous, basically a childhood star. That's what people have known him since he was like 9 years old. He started doing videos. So that has always been part of the equation. And we have a ton of fans from all over the country, especially on YouTube now, that came here to get our perspective because they were Shedeur first. And now they've kind of adopted the Browns. They hate the media here that have said anything critical of Shedeur. They think we all are out to get him. And I've said some harsh things about them as a fan base. Shedeur, I like. He seems extremely likable. But I did not ever think it made any sense for the meal ticket of everybody, the front office and the head coach, we thought at the time, was for Shedeur to play really well. And then everybody saves their job. And then with that great defense, now we're cooking. But instead, it didn't go that way, and the coach lost his job. So what sense would any of that make? But people are divided on it. I'm going to tell you, like, we have people telling us every day that Kevin Stefanski sabotaged Shedeur Sanders.
Yeah, and that's definitely part of the frustration here in Atlanta. And I'll be honest, I was a little bit surprised just how negative the Falcons fan base was in regards to the hire of Kevin Stefanski. And I do think some of the criticisms and the complaints that they have are somewhat fair. I also think there's a large misunderstanding of Kevin Stefanski's power in roster building up in Cleveland and the role he played compared to the role, Andrew Berry, Sashi Brown, Jimmy Haslam, and the like played up there. So there is concern, but like the biggest thing I keep getting thrown down here is we hired a coach that had a worse record over the last 2 years than the coach in Raheem Morris that we just fired. That is the biggest complaint, is that this guy does not win games. And the counter would be let him be given a quality quarterback, which I do not believe you guys had in Cleveland over the past 2 years. And then the counter to that counter would be he had 13 quarterbacks and wasn't able to develop any of them. A lot of people believe Kevin Stefanski is to blame for running Baker Mayfield out of Cleveland. And they look at Deshaun Watson in Houston. They look at Deshaun Watson under Stefanski, and they say, what happened? Who burned this quarterback? And Stefanski's just getting a lot of blame for those things.
Abe Gordon joining us on the Make It Right, Call Kyle Wright hotline. Abe, you mentioned the 13 quarterbacks. I guess my question, and this has been my defense of Kevin, which of those 13 was he supposed to develop that were here? I mean, some of the names on the list are just mind-numbing. But when I look at this Falcons roster and what he inherits, and starting with Bijan Robinson, knowing what he did with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt here in Cleveland, in which the Browns had 3 seasons, 2020, 2021, 2023, where the offense was amongst the best that this franchise has had going back to the mid-'90s. So what's Kevin walking into down there with the Falcons from a talent perspective? Is he getting a roster upgrade than what he had here in Cleveland?
I think offensively there's a roster upgrade, but you still have a question at quarterback here. And look, Michael Penix is not Dorian Thompson-Robinson. I think we all understand that. But he still has some question marks, and we still got to see if he's a franchise quarterback, and that is tough to figure out when he's also dealing with the injury that he's dealing with, and we don't know if he's going to be ready week 1 or not. But at the end of the day, this is a loaded, offensively talented team. You're probably going to end up finding a way to bring back Kyle Pitts, who is second-team All-Pro tight end, along with Drake London, who can be one of the best receivers in the NFL, and Bijan Robinson, as you mentioned, who is, in my opinion, the best running back in the NFL. Your line is not the greatest line ever assembled, but it's not the Chargers line. It's not the Bengals offensive line. It's not a total disaster. It's a line offensively that you can win with. So I do think this team is relatively loaded on offense. You need to add in number 2 receiver, maybe a number 3 as well. But if Kevin Stefanski, for whatever reason, if he can get away from whatever held him down in Cleveland, which I agree is quarterback play, I think you can have success here.
What I think you guys absolutely should go after is if he realistically is bringing Tommy Rees and Bubba Ventrone with the staff. I mean, that makes no sense to me. Those were failing operations last year. And I get it. Talent is going to be talked about. Bubba Ventrone, even on special teams in his press conferences, was acting like talent was the issue, which probably didn't go over very well with Andrew Berry, the GM. But that's something that would be very, very curious to me.
Yeah, the Ventrone one is one that people here in Atlanta are not going to get frustrated by, but I've seen some of the frustration there. We also just went through a special teams coordinator that most of us were asking to be fired early in the season, and at no point did our previous head coach, Raheem Morris, take any of those steps. And so there are some issues on special teams here as well. This was not a team that could cover kickoffs. It was embarrassing, and it cost them games. This is a team that had a serious kicker issue up until late in the year when we ended up finding Zane Gonzalez, who could do the job. So, I think that, look, if we're not going to crush Kevin Stefanski for the offense and the lack of production the past couple of years in Cleveland, I don't know if it's safe to also then crush Tommy Rees. Now, the play calling is its own discussion, right? He handed off play calling to Rees. Is he going to call plays here in Atlanta? If it is Tommy Rees, is Rees going to call plays? There's still a lot that we don't know yet that hasn't been announced yet to be decided. Not many people were overly excited about the potential of Tommy Rees. People are a little bit more excited about Callahan potentially joining as the offensive line coach, although Dwayne Ledford here was very well liked as well. So it'll be interesting to see how much flack he gets for the staff he puts together.
Look, listen, shame on Kevin Stefanski for not developing Case Keenum, Nick Mullins, Jacoby Brissett, P.J. Walker, Jeff Driscoll, Bailey Zappi. Just what an awful job by Kevin here in Cleveland. That being said, he is going to keep the defensive coordinator, Jeff Ulbrich, collaboration here in Cleveland with the Browns. A thing. He had to make coordinator decisions in a collaborative space. It just wasn't all him. Is that the case down there as well? Was he told or encouraged to keep Jeff, or was this strictly a Kevin Stefanski decision?
No, he would have been very strongly encouraged. In fact, Arthur Blank kind of made some comments. It wasn't a prerequisite to the hire, right? I don't think they were going to lose out on their favorite candidate because he didn't want to keep Ulbrich, but people are very happy with what Ulbrich has done this year, and definitely wanted him to be at least in consideration for whomever the new head coach was, now being Kevin Stefanski. And obviously we got the reports Saturday before the official hire that Stefanski would be open to keeping Ulbrich. That certainly would have boosted his chances in the eyes of Matt Ryan and Arthur Blank. So this is something they liked. This is a Falcons defense that out of nowhere set the franchise record for sacks in a season. They had a rookie in James Spears Jr. come out and nearly get double digits. May have even gotten there by the end of it. So they're very happy with how the defense played under Jeff Ulbrich. I think that's one of the more positive aspects of this coaching hire, is that your defense is in place and your defense feels pretty close to being win ready, like ready to go. And now it's just about getting the offense in gear as well.
Abe, do people down in the South care at all about the national championship tonight? Weird thing to ask when you guys used to every year. All those grads in the SEC.
First off, they do, because college football is always going to be huge in Atlanta. It's probably the biggest college football city this country has that's not team dependent. College Football Hall of Fame is located here. Obviously, we have the Peach Bowl and have had a number of national championship games, stuff like that here. So, yes, but it is currently being overshadowed by the Falcons head coaching search and now the hire.
Kevin Stefanski, bigger than college football today down in the South. Amazing, Abe.
Yeah, maybe not in a positive light, but certainly more discussed.
All right, Abe. We appreciate you coming back on despite all the things that Ken has put you through over the years.
Anytime, guys. Appreciate you having me.
All right, Abe Gordon on the hotline. Big in Atlanta radio.
They're gonna have to get used to hearing about how Kevin needs to coach better down in Atlanta.
Man, for a nice fee.
I could do some consulting to help Kevin. I love Kevin. I kid, but there was just only, if I had $1 for every time Kevin Stefanski said he had to coach better, I would not be sitting in this chair this morning. I would be laying on a beach in front of my very large and expensive beach home somewhere in a much warmer climate.
All right.